Well, not a lot has happened in hockey since the Hurricanes clinched the series. I'm joking, of course, but maybe we'll talk more about that when I do an end of season and talk about how my playoff predictions were, who makes the playoffs. I mean, my season standings type of situation there and how accurate they were because it's not looking good. The team I had winning the Western Conference didn't make the playoffs. I think Edmonton and Carolina, maybe the Rangers, we'll see, were all uh, eliminated. Florida advanced. I think I had Florida in there as well. So, which that prediction wasn't looking too good at first, but nonetheless, let's talk about the Hurricanes the clinching the second round, or advancing, not clinching, because you clinch a playoff spot, you advance in the playoffs. Advancing in the first round against the New York Islanders. This was honestly a hold on one second, guys. Okay, sorry about the pause cut there. I know that was no time for you guys, and for me it was about 10 seconds, but I have a cat that's wanting attention. So, once again, if you hear meowing or see him in the background, it's a cat who, whenever they're in the room, wants attention. But as I was saying, this was honestly a well coached Brindam. This was a Brindamore playoff series win, in my opinion. I think there are flaws that are red flags going into the second round that I will talk about. But Brindamore, I think, for the most part, really was able to adjust dealing with the injuries he's had. I mean, Svechnikov, Teravainen, and Patches I've talked about before, and was able to shuffle lines around to make sure Carolina was able to consistently play. But there are some red flags I want to talk about. All in all, positives all around. But there is concerns I have going into round two. And that's Carolina really does not know how to defend themselves. And what I mean by that is Carolina basically Aho for games 5 and 6 continued to get mugged. He was the victims of cross checks. He was the victim of big hits, and they kept doing it because Carolina showed they can get away with it. And I don't think you can win a Stanley Cup when teams aren't really scared of what will happen if they try to intimidate you or wear down your star player through dirty plays that the refs just don't call. Even in my league, they don't call those. So it's one of those things where, yeah, it's a penalty and stuff. The refs should call it, but they're not. So you got to defend Sebastian Aho. And they just didn't. And Sebastian Aho endured a lot. I think the main one that bugged me was after the whistle. When Aho got the interference penalty, a guy came up and cross-checked Aho, and there wasn't even a scrum from it. I'm like, that's Sebastian Aho. Sebastian Aho is your meal ticket. Not only win the Stanley Cup, but get farther in the playoffs, get you more points, which means more money in your future contracts, more prestige around your name, potentially because Sebastian Aho is the best player on the Hurricanes, and you got to protect him like he's your meal ticket because he is, and they weren't protecting him. He was not protected at all, and it really showed in Game 6 because the Islanders have figured out they can get away with that. I mean, the seeds were really planted, I believe, by Game 2. It was like I think there wasn't really that much of a response when Matt Martin just decked Jordan Stahl. And you're not going to be able to win playoff series by when you're getting out hit every game. Or you're going to be able to because Carolina did, but you're not going to be able to win the Stanley Cup if you're getting out hit every game. I'm not saying you got to have more hits than the other team or lay dirty hits or try to take cheap shots or anything, but you got to be able to intimidate teams and not back down when a team tries to intimidate you. And I don't think Carolina really did. And on to that, Sebastian Aho, I should potentially give it to Paul Stastny for scoring the overtime winner. However, with what Sebastian Aho had to endure during that game, victim of big hits, victim of cross checks, and everything in between, he deserves Hurricane of the Game for getting that goal to tie the game. Biggest goal of the season, in my opinion, even bigger than Stastny. Because without that goal, Paul Stastny does we don't get to overtime. Paul Stastny doesn't score, even though Stastny's goal was a series clincher. I could have given it to Paul Stastny. But yeah, I know this was a little bit negative, but it really did bother me how much Sebastian Aho was the victim of without even a response, especially McGeckern. McGeckern is 6'2", Basically, Chicago Wolves call up from the injuries. He's done great. He's made great plays and done great, obviously, with the goal and the assist the night before. Or not the night before, but in game five. So he's done a great job, but I mean, you're 6'2" when you're an AHL call up. Defend the guy you're on a line with. And you know, all in all, they win. They had a defensive clinic. Actually, no. Here's what happened. This is mostly negative, and I don't like that. That's mostly negative because they ended up winning the game, and they've moved on to round two. But I predicted Carolina would, or I was going to predict. I didn't get a chance to get my playoff predictions in before the start of the playoffs, but I was going to predict Carolina would beat the Islanders, and they did, so I kind of know that's going to happen, but I'm looking at what Carolina can improve of going into round two because I feel like New Jersey or Rangers both are going to be a tougher task than the New York Islanders. No offense to the Islanders, they got a really good fourth line. Barzal's a really good player. Mayfield was a very good defenseman for him in the playoffs. Very talented team. That's not a knock on the Islanders. I just think New Jersey and the Rangers are better. And yeah, so what Carolina needs to fix are these things, and they got outplayed for the first two periods. Granted, hats off to them in the third period, and as the third period went on, they came back stronger, got the tying goal, and came out and won the game in overtime. That's all you need. Freddie Anderson played very well for playing his first playoff game for Carolina. I wonder if he's always supposed to have been the starter. I kind of prefer Ranta in that right now, but if Freddie can keep giving performances like he did, only giving up one goal in 4.5 periods, more power to him, and he'll prove me wrong. And I love when Hurricanes, I doubt, prove me wrong. But yeah, they really did actually get outplayed quite a bit in the first two periods, but they hanged on, got the win. Round two, and you know, Carolina has just become a consistent playoff, like I wouldn't say playoff performer, but they went from a team that would make the playoffs, go on a deep run, not make the playoffs for a few years, make the playoffs, go on a deep run, all from 2002 to 2019. And then for 2020, they made the playoffs by winning a play-in round. They lost in the first round, but they still made the playoffs. They 2021, they made the playoffs, lost in the second round. 2022, they made the playoffs, lost in the second round, and they're getting to the second round again. So while Carolina, yeah, you want to get past the second round, they've gone from a feast or famine team to a consistently good team. Rod Brind'Amour is the most consistent coach in franchise history. I honestly think he surpassed Paul Maurice, in my opinion, for greatest Hurricanes coach of all time, just for that consistentness, the amount of players that have had career renaissance under him. You know, I mean, just the goalies alone: Peter Mrazek, James Reimer. I'm trying to Ranta. I don't know if Ranta was struggling, but Frederick Anderson kind of came in and played well for Carolina. Tony DeAngelo had his best season as a Carolina Hurricane. So, like, it is really just props to Brind'Amour. And whenever Carolina does do things like advance in a playoff series or make the playoffs, I like to pay tribute because I don't want to take this for granted. '06 was my first real season as a hockey fan. I remember being a fan before that, but I mean, just, you know, when you're four, you don't really know what's going on. So I think I was a fan in '04, but I'm not sure. But '06 was the first hockey season I can remember watching. And I didn't realize how rare your favorite team winning a Stanley Cup was going to be. And, you know, it's real. And, you know, they made the playoffs in '09. They lost in the conference finals. And then it was just misery. I had people not knowing the Hurricanes even were an NHL team because they just never made the playoffs. But here we are in 2022, and people know who the Hurricanes are because of that. I have friends who are willing to get into hockey and everything. And yeah, I mean, just every time your team accomplishes something, don't take it for granted because you never know when it'll come again. You know, I mean, so yeah, I mean, for all we know, it could be another, like, it could be 2033 until the Hurricanes make the playoffs again. You just don't know. Because in 2009, I didn't think I was going to have to wait till 2019. So don't take this for granted as a Hurricanes fan. Enjoy it while it's happening. And yeah, four down, 12 to go.